Recently, you people have pestered me about making more Wii U games, and that is exactly what I'm going to do. Today, we're going to be taking one of the biggest tax write-offs in history and making it for the most defunct console. Now, my legal advisor has shown me recent problems that Portal remakes have had. So in order to avoid that, we'll be taking extra precautions, like causing more havoc and breaking more laws. This is Redeveloping, and today we are making Portal for the Wii U. Now, I am no stranger to Wii U homebrew. I have made a few games at this point, so the real challenge is making sure that the console can handle what we are going to throw at it. Portal is a simple concept. The player solves puzzles with cubes, lasers, and buttons, and then the player is given the portal gun to be able to manipulate those cubes, lasers, and buttons. While it may look simple, it provides complex gameplay and also complex programming problems. We can split the portal into 3 sections to work on: seeing through the portal, placing the portal, and going through the portal. Let's start with seeing through the portal. After loading up Unity 2017, yes, we still need to use this old version, we can set up an environment using assets ripped from the games. If you ever want to do this, there are websites across the net dedicated to ripping sprites, textures, models, and sounds for you to use. Obviously, there are copyright issues here, and I can tell you, it's fun, but there's problems. But let's just say that these models were sourced academically and won't be redistributed for these reasons. But we don't really care about breaking copyright law, we care about seeing through portals. So when you look through the portal, you should be able to see out the other portal, and we can mimic this by giving each of the portals a camera and connecting the camera to the other's material. Now, while it looks ugly right now, it does technically work. Now we need to use custom code and UV mapping to make it even better. For the unenlightened, UV mapping is a way of putting a texture onto a model. And for us, our texture is going to be the camera, and our UV map is going to be the oval of the portal. Before we can put that oval there, we need to make sure that the perspectives line up. You will notice that in our original clip here, that the camera is always pointed at the same direction. It's not rotating with the player. So the view is always wrong. It's almost like a camera and a TV screen instead of an actual wormhole. In order to fix this, we need to make sure that the cameras that are attached to the portal move in the same way that the player does. That way, whenever the player looks through a portal, they will see what they're supposed to see at the right perspective and distance. Once we do that, we will be able to cut out that oval that we want. We now have the visuals of the portal done. And before we move on to shooting the portals, we should make sure that this runs on the Wii U at max performance first. So, just like before, we can go into our build settings and create a build of the game. Whew, moment of truth time. We gotta make sure this thing works. So, welcome to Portal U. Please work. Hey! Alright, I don't have any movement controls in, but that's a portal, and I can see the side of me. It works. That's all that matters. It's an oval. Look at the oval. Now that I have confirmed that this will work, we need to add controls and then shooting the portal. Unlike other games, when you have to make controls for a Wii U game, you need to access the Wii U library itself. It will give you access to all of the Wii remotes and the Wii U gamepad. For us, we are going to use one Wii remote and a nunchuck. That way, we can use the controller on the gun, aim with the Joy-Con, and shoot and move with the remote. Separately, we have access to a ton of other buttons in order to do things like jumping or interacting, or maybe even picking up cubes. Then, I decided to try and 3D print a new gun. This one will let us use both the Wii remote and the nunchuck as one unit. Just don't tell anyone I'm expanding the Wii U arsenal. I already have way too many weapons for this thing. With this piece of plastic, let's now add the controls. The first thing we're going to do is add movement. For this, I'm going to use the D-pad, and that way it's just simple, forward, backwards, left, and right. For rotations, we're going to use the joystick, and that way you can kind of move around and it's quite simple. But this is where we encounter our first problem. It turns out that I wasn't getting the performance that I thought I was. It looks like I'm running at well below 10 FPS whenever I rotate, and it's definitely because of the portals. So my solution is to divide the resolution that the portals are rendering at. Instead of rendering them at full resolution, I'm going to do them at a quarter and see if I can get it to at least work. While this is a temporary fix for performance, we do need to be worried when we add in all of our extra effects for later, like particles and puzzles. Moving forward, now that we know that the Wii U can handle rendering the portals, we need to talk about shooting. I quickly added a UI element at the center of the screen. When the player wants to shoot the gun, they can press one of the action buttons. Then a raycast will be shot out from the camera, and if a wall or an object the player is shooting can have a portal on it, we can then set a portal to that position. At the same time, if we shoot a blue portal, but one already exists, we will remove that old blue portal. Before moving on to teleporting, let's give the game an overhaul. I found these buttons online and I connected them up to the door. Then I added cubes that can be moved by the player and can be placed on buttons. When both buttons are pressed, the door will open. I also replaced the basic walls and floors and added some more flair to make the game look better. But sadly, this is where I ran into some problems. My project was deleted in the rush to start school. While I couldn't have predicted this, making this new project was able to somewhat save some things because I had saved it into my documents folder rather than my desktop. But what that does mean is that we've got to rebuild these portals, and I don't have the full time. I only have Monday left, and we got to be able to do this in about 7 hours. So far, I had used Sebastian Laig's portal video as my base, but in reality, it's just so clunky, and it wasn't really built for, a portal game. But what I did find is Brackeys. He has a video on portals from 2017, or at least that's the version of Unity that he was using. So if we use that instead, it turns out that we already have a portal game working on the Wii U. It sucks that we have to start all of these problems over again, but in reality, this actually solves more problems than it created. Because we are using this code, it fixes the cameras, and it also makes sure that we can teleport things without having to use something like Easy Slice. I am sure that my method of making portals and splitting cubes in half would have worked, but I just can't. My whole project is just gone, and while I could spend another week or two rebuilding it all the way from the ground up, I just felt that it was necessary to get it off my plate and move on to other projects. But with every horrible disaster comes great opportunity. We can remodel all of the Portal stuff in a low poly style, just like the original Portal 64 game that we were looking at. So, let's start by making a new cube. By keeping it low poly enough, we may not have to worry about performance concerns as much as we did before. After making a cube, we can move on to making walls and doors and buttons, just like we had before, but this time, they're modeled by me, which means we don't have to worry about any sort of overhead that we had to with models. I then loaded up Brackeys' Portal game and started replacing assets. I also reintegrated my oval shader into the portal. That way we can have our classic ovals like we did before. After some tweaking with the code and making sure that all the controls were working with the Wii U, we now had a fairly decent looking Portal game. We just had to remake shooting, and that was it. We would have our puzzles. Now, before we do the final export, we need to worry about performance. Remember, we're trying to render with 3 different cameras, the main camera and then the 2 Portal cameras. The best option is to make the Wii U render at 720p and not 1080p. This saves us a tiny bit of performance, but it also means that the portals will also be rendering at a lower resolution. We can also cut those portals even smaller without making it too obvious. And with that combined, we can get back our 30 FPS so that way we have a playable game. Now we can make our final export. I added everything together, threw it onto my Wii U. This time, it worked fully. Now, it could have been better if I didn't, delete my project halfway through working this. But in reality, I think it was really cool to be able to see 3 or 4 different ways of rendering portals, including cameras and render textures, or just, cheating. And all of those different things really just grow people as programmers, doing research and finding solutions. Now I really think this is probably just my first failure in a long time. But at least it kind of still taught me some things between portals and transitions and rotations. And, I think it's cool, but it's definitely not the quality that I was looking for, especially since everything's still so glitchy. Anyway, like this video if you liked it, dislike it if you hate me, comment all the things I did wrong, and, I'll see you in the next one where I hopefully don't die.